council meeting of April 8th, 2021 to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Holland.
Here.
Councilor Dunn.
Here.
Councilor Booth.
Here.
Councilor Lambert.
Here.
Councilor Morris.
Here.
Councilor Woodruff.
Here.
Councilor Townsend.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay, we have the minutes from the March 15th, 2021 meeting and the minutes from the March 11th, 2021 meeting to approve. Do we have a motion or if there's any corrections?
Or do you want to both at the same time?
Yeah,
Or do you want them one at a time?
you can do both at the
I
same
make a
time.
motion to approve both minutes.
All right.
I'll second that.
All
Good.
right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And looking at no audience, so we'll have no public comments. Okay. Moving on to COVID discussion. Was there anything on COVID we had to discuss?
It's pretty amazing how quickly things can change. So when I wrote this last week, we were still at medium. We're now at high as of tomorrow, and will be for 2 weeks. The only other piece that's very important is that the South County vaccine distribution site is up and running very successfully. And as of, I believe, the 19th, everyone is eligible for vaccines. And
True.
can sign up, so.
Even under 16?
Well,
No,
there's still,
16
yeah.
and over.
16 and over. I don't think there is any vaccine yet approved for
Oh,
under
when you
16.
said everyone.
I can tell you that I was there last Saturday for the whole thing, and we served over 280 people. Wow. And we got more thank yous than I've ever got in my life for being there. And I know that they're there today, and they're doing the Johnson & Johnson today. And then they'll be there next Saturday, the 17th, and they will be doing the number 2s. May 1st is the number 2s.
I was in a meeting with the county mayors and Katie Jacobson, and it said they are looking for volunteers. If anybody has some time and wants to volunteer, they need volunteers, they said. So
Yeah, it's a process and a half, but I think it was well worth being able to see our community coming through. Of course, we had people all the way from Portland that showed up.
Wow. Impressive. Okay, moving on then, we'll go to the RFP proposal for the old museum building.
So we finally got the all clear on the tiles, which I think I mentioned. And so Public Works is trying to get those removed from the interpretive center here in about the next week. And so our museum staff are eagerly, planning on moving pretty quickly afterwards to get everything set up so that we can get the interpretive center open as quickly as we can. Although at high, I don't think we're going to jump into that right away, but I think as we get a little bit farther down and the status goes down, we'll get that facility open. As part of that, we will now have an empty building in town, the old museum building. And as we had kind of committed to back before I think a bunch of you were on council, we'd kind of committed to doing an RFP for that building and putting it out there so that interested groups in the community could put together a proposal of what they could like to do for the community with that building. And then that would then come back to the council for review. I would do some scoring to make sure that people were able to actually meet the requirements. And then I would bring that back to the council so that the council would make a kind of a global decision on the purpose of that facility. And so most of an RFP is really like, okay, you have to turn in this here, you have to, the kind of the base requirements. So I didn't bring the RFP. What I brought are kind of the overriding goals of the RFP. And I wanted just confirmation that these goals are what you are hoping and intending to see from the outcome of that process. And if not, let me know what you want changed.
I guess if it requires that it's a service available to all members of the community, it probably lets out a lot of worthy nonprofit groups that might otherwise be interested. Is that a specific requirement that we've ever discussed before? I'm not sure that I'm for or against it, I'm just
I,
probing.
I tend to start as most inclusive as possible, and
Okay.
then upon direction, we can, discuss what options might be available if we were to be more exclusive in the usage.
I think when I read that, and I think I know where Sue is going, the Girl Scouts are gonna hold it and use it. Is that for all persons? Girl Scouts are not gonna have Boy Scouts come into it. So I think it kind of closes down who can, I mean, I know the purpose of what the word means. Anybody gets to use the building, but, which group can use it at a time, I think is that, I don't know if that's where Sue's going. That's the way,
Well,
that's the way that I read it.
I was just thinking, it may cut out, and I'm not thinking of anybody, and specifically, you mentioned Girl Scouts, but it may cut out other similar kinds of group that serve a particular body that isn't all of the community, and maybe that could be taken care of in the scoring, rather than
That would be,
taking them out at the beginning.
I guess my question is like, well, then what is the community center? Because like if a nonprofit needs to use a space for just their organization for that time, we have the community center. I think of this as that this is gonna be somebody who wants to use the building all the time.
Right, a group that wants to use it all the time.
And a group
which-
that wants to form like community partnerships and have like partnerships with the library and the chamber and the
And maybe the Girl Scouts.
And the Girl Scouts.
Right.
and,
Sure, but so
Right.
that would be all-inclusive to me means that they would be working with
We
other.
were working with all the community.
And not just saying
Partnerships
this
with the
is-
city too, and with everybody.
Although I don't think we've included that they have to be, working with a whole bunch of other partnerships.
Well, I think it would, the more inclusive, the better, I would think. I don't know.
That would kind of
Diversity,
depend,
equity, and inclusion amongst the community to me implies partnership. I
so it
guess.
would not be a single entity using the building,
Well, could.
but it couldn't also,
It could or
Yeah.
it couldn't. It depends on what,
the matter of interpretation.
the matter of
Depends on the
interpretation and the
particular
access.
group, yeah.
Well, and it could depend on honestly, it could depend on the scoring as well and the feeling of the council.
Right,
For example, if the only group that came forward was a single employer here in town who wanted to turn it back into the barracks that it used to be,
Yeah.
so that they could provide low-income housing to their employees, that would be up to the council to decide. It really, we're trying not to pigeonhole any specific group, and that's,
Right.
that's why I tried to write the goals as broadly as possible, so that we weren't, narrowly picking, okay, this is really the group we want. What we're trying to say is, any group should look at this and apply, and then really it will be the council determining what is the best use for the community.
well, then maybe we need to modify the wording just a little bit, because it's written right
Absolutely.
now, sounds like we've pigeonholed it to something that's available to all members of the community, which is a grand idea and might be what we pick in the end, but whether we want to filter out other uses at the beginning is a question for the council.
Yeah, that's interesting, because what I hear you saying, Sue, is if someone wanted to use it, say, like as a homeless shelter, that wouldn't be applicable for all of our community. But
Yeah, for
maybe
sure,
that should
yeah.
have as much leverage to use the
Or at least
space.
the opportunity to apply. We may not, want that, or we may not want the Girl Scouts, or we may not want the arts group, but, I was just hoping not to beforehand decide how many people can't apply.
Right, but
I think number 3 also kind of tells you, this person, whoever they are applying, they're in charge of the funds that are going to be to keep that building going. So
Right.
they're going to have a vested interest to walk in the door, and they're going to know
Right.
what the criteria is when they walk on the door. So, if it is a group that's going to use it once a month on a Tuesday, but that's going to be a different, I presume, than somebody who's going to be full-time 24, not 24/7, that'd be the shelter again, but the word all just kind of throws me off a little
Just
bit.
take out the word all.
Hmm?
Just take out the word all, just available to members of the community, instead of members of all.
Yeah, because then it goes back to your scoring, and I think the scoring will determine how we all decide what is best.
Maybe instead of all, it's maybe like as much of the community or more of the community.
That's almost all.
I mean, I was shocked at the last meeting when folks were telling us that families didn't live in Waldport. Because families do live in Waldport, in city limits. So like,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, trust me, they do.
Yeah. So for me to say all or most of the community, to me, that's like we're trying to make this a building that's available to more than one demographic. That's how I'm reading this, is we're trying to make this service as available to as many demographics as possible. And I guess for me, it's like, then to me, it's like maybe it's not appropriate for someone who wants to do a homeless shelter to apply, because we give it points? You know what I mean? I don't want people to spend a lot of time on something if it's not something that we really think that's the direction that the council's going in, I guess. Because I write those proposals and it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of disappointment. And so I don't want to give people like false hopes, I guess.
Well, and I think my understanding is we're looking for a leaseor or a renter, not that it's going to be more like the community center where different groups
I was
can
thinking
come
that
and go.
they're
I
two
mean,
different ones.
It'll be somebody signing on a dotted line that they're going to pay the bills and operate in, our criteria.
Yeah, but to me, it'd be so sad if an organization took it and then like lock the doors and no one gets to use it.
Well, I'm sure we will cover that in the paperwork.
So that's kind of where that all
Well,
part
and
too,
that's-
is we want to
In many ways, that's why I was trying to write it so that Joe's Liquor couldn't necessarily buy the building and turn it into a
Right.
speakeasy,
right.
Right.
because that,
Yeah,
though interesting,
that,
That's an idea. Dancing girls.
Isn't there two buildings there? I can't remember.
Oh, there's a kind of a.
no, just one.
One, and then
There's a little
two
side
separate, yeah.
storage shed.
Kind of
Oh, is it a
storage
shed?
shed.
Okay.
My other question, Dan, is this a city building once we lease this out, or is this their building?
unless you direct me otherwise, the intention was that we would lease this building.
So it would not
With
be a
a-
city building like the community center?
It would not be a city building like the community center. This would be much like we do with the old public works facility. That currently is leased. We do on that one have a lease to own option, i.e. they have the option to buy it at some point, which I imagine that they will exercise given what they're putting into the building. On the other hand, we could get a proposal, or you could direct me now to put together a proposal that would, include either a lease to own option or a outright sale option to an interested party that meets your criteria.
What's the benefit of that? Just that we get,
It's as
we don't
as
worry
a
about it.
landlord right now for the old public works shop, there are challenges being a landlord.
okay,
People
Well,
always
and
don't pay rent.
especially if the cost that we're leasing it for doesn't include maintenance, then we're still, got budgetary issues with
Well,
it.
and to be truthful, the idea here wasn't that we were going to charge a rent for this building and lease it, is that we would actually have, that money would actually be set aside in essentially an escrow account for the building maintenance. And so there wouldn't necessarily be a rent per se, there would be based on appropriate cost recovery for building maintenance, there would be a fund that went into that escrow account that entity being responsible for the building could then draw against and provide the city documentation of like, oh, hey, we're replacing the roof this year. There's $20,000 in here. We're going to take $10,000 out. The idea is that we're trying to do a community service with the building at the lowest possible cost to the entity doing it, and that we will never have costs again for the building. It wasn't that we would make money from the building. And so in some ways there is a benefit to saying, and if you can propose this usage, we just as soon just sell the building to you. And as long as this usage, what we don't want is to get somebody to come in and make promises, buy the building, have 6 months of operation, close down and turn around and flip the building for, $200,000-300,000 more.
Well, I feel like,
Remember, we got the building for free.
yeah, I feel like when I worked for a Neighbors for Kids organization, the city sold that property for like $1 to the nonprofit with the said that if they go out of business or quit their nonprofit, it goes back to the city.
It's called a right of reversion.
Right, but they own the building, which helps with grant writing, because grantors want to see nonprofits own their space. So
Yeah,
it's kind of
that's
a
true.
win-win for both that way.
Well, we could always do a community development organization to get grants done for it.
Yeah, I just need direction from the council what you would like.
So back to your escrow thing, so how does the money get in there? Is that basically what the leaseor puts in on a monthly basis?
Yes.
Will build up to pay for maintenance?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
what it would cost for maintenance, so therefore
Okay.
the expectation is that a deposit into this account every year, wouldn't be monthly, it would be every year, would be made based on the expected maintenance that, rates for a commercial building of that age.
Doesn't it make more sense to do it monthly? I think
I
people
think
get along better.
In the proposal, they will almost certainly say, okay, we would contribute this money monthly. It doesn't matter if they, honestly, from the city standpoint, they could
Right.
put in 365 small amounts versus one big amount.
Right. I'm just thinking about how budgeting happens in groups and in families and
Yep.
everything else, and it seems like to keep up with it on a regular basis is probably, if you put something off for a year,
What I'm trying to avoid is the city having to spend a lot of time paying attention to it.
right.
The ideal situation would be that somebody comes in, they put the money down right away for the first year's maintenance, and they've got a usage that you've determined that would be the most successful, and they just go ahead and do it, and then we
Yeah.
stop paying attention to the building.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, we just run a yearly report on that escrow fund and see where it is and see the documentation that we require on expenditures out of that fund. But the idea being is that we would pay almost no attention to it.
I agree with that.
So you're looking for us to say something, huh?
I'm just,
Either change the goals or make a motion with these.
so right now,
I just had the one word, all.
All,
I have scratched out the word all, but beyond that, I have no other significant modifications unless you have something that is, you could all just tell me right now, sell it, with the purpose that it's turned into housing. You could tell me
Why
to
don't you,
make it a circus.
why
You
don't
could-
we,
Yes.
why don't we decide on the lease to own or sale when we select the organization that we're going to?
So the RFP will give those options. The
Yeah.
RFP will basically
don't really have
spell
to
out,
decide
you can
that
either
now.
buy it with this
Everything
dedicated
else looks
purchase.
fine to me, except that, I agree with what Jamie said, all is just, it's too inclusive.
Just remove the all, and then problem solved.
Everything else looks fine, and selling it would be really a thought process that would go far for me, so.
Well,
It would be what?
It would be a thought process for me if it was out of our worry, I mean.
so how about we just,
I do know, for example, when we talk about the sale, I do know, for example, that one of the uses that has been requested is a local business owner who's trying to find housing for their employees because they are really struggling. Believe me when I say, there is not a lot of available units
true.
for rent around here,
and housing's a big issue.
and it's a huge issue.
but
So,
that serves, what, 2 people to live in there for that one business?
well, and that's,
That's when we would,
Well,
but
serves
that's,
everyone
that's
that
where it
serves
comes
everybody.
back to you, and you have to judge this use versus this use. I think the city administration does not want to necessarily make that decision, because
Right.
that really is a decision that rests on your shoulders.
So rather than saying a service available to all members of the community, how about just saying something more generic like a community benefit, which would cut out, you know, a lot of the specifics there and leave it more flexible, that it might be a
How does,
homeless.
instead of service to the community, a benefit to the community?
Yeah, just, yeah,
That benefits the community.
that benefits the community, yeah. Is that a little less specific or broader?
It is for me.
Well, that's pretty much what you have in number 1, isn't it?
That's what, used for public good and service to the community. I think the service word itself is a little limiting.
Well, I don't mind changing service with benefits, but I still keep going back to that when we're grading these proposals, the more people in our community that can use it is gonna be higher. So I feel like that's why we need to articulate either that benefits the most members in the community, you know, something like that. Because I'm not
Well-
leaning towards renting it out for a few people. Like,
Okay.
so like, I'd rather just start that out there. Do you
It-
see what I'm saying?
It
I don't
also,
see that
though,
far
might
in
be
that.
that among the proposals, we would look at them and we would decide that this is the most pressing need the community has, though it will not help everybody or most people in the community. It's still critical enough nature that we're gonna go that route. Instead of something that would serve more individuals, we choose something that is more overall beneficial to the community in some way. Without getting into the details, I just think that could happen. I mean, we might see an option like that as we get, if we have several proposals.
We may only have one.
Yeah,
I think we don't limit it to that, like, let anyone that wants to put the time in to apply to it, and we can make that decision later on, like, no, we don't want it to go out to just one person to live there, we want it to help these 20 people. We can make that decision once we see what actually wants to be there.
do you have any thoughts about the term of the agreement that would be, I mean, how long do you think?
I was going to require 2 years. And again, there's considerable amount of city action that needs to take place. And so if you get a group that's, you know, that can only commit to a year, it becomes challenging for us to
Yeah.
churn that building every year.
Right.
I think some groups would probably want like a 5-year commitment.
Well, and I think that's what you
That's
leave
even
open.
better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
that
you
should
leave
be in the
open
heart
to
of
like.
the-
Some
the minimum-
groups, I don't know what
is-
groups would want a longer
The minimum is
commitment.
2 years. But I mean, we've had, so the 3 groups that I know that have expressed interest outside is obviously the arts group is one.
Right.
The business owner who'd like to find housing is the second. And then back before, the Lions Club is the third. So, you know, I know that at least those 3 entities, there may be other entities, there may be church groups, there may be, you know, other displaced groups looking for a new home that would like to propose that usage. And I think that what I tried to do in the goals is reflect kind of the previous feelings is we didn't want to exclude a group ahead of time before
Right.
those proposals came to the council.
Right.
That way we weren't, you know, saying, okay, hey, this is an inside track, this group's got the, we wanted to make it as available to everybody to make the proposal and then decide, okay, these groups seem to meet the financial criteria, these groups can't meet this criteria because of this, or these groups are wanting to kick the tires, but they don't really have a plan.
Well, and I think of the comments we've had, it's pretty much that we've felt that maybe we've restricted it a little too much, not the other way. So if you probably can fix that easily without ours.
Yeah, I think service will
over.
change to benefit to the community, and then the benefit is an arbitrary determination
Yeah.
that the council.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Dan will err on the side of letting things through instead of,
Right, so
Marking
that's
them
why I
out.
think he probably can just wordsmith it
To be honest, the only thing that is not
Rita.
gonna come through is if a group can't show financial
Yeah.
responsibility.
There you go.
Exactly.
Every other piece of this is subjective enough that I really feel that the council is going to want to weigh in yay or nay on the value. My scoring will be, yes, they have the resources to be able to pay the bills. Because the last thing we want to do is get into a situation where we have a group that can't afford to pay for the maintenance, can't afford to pay the water bill. And now we're, leaning our own property.
Yeah, right. So are we good, or you need
Are we
something
good on
more
that? Oh, we need a
specific?
motion.
I would just need a motion to proceed with the RFP.
Do we have a motion to proceed with the RFP then?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. American Rescue Plan, City Fund Planning. Boy, this is some big fun. We get to spend money, yay!
So this is coming to you today instead of coming through the budget committee, because technically we'll receive these funds in this year. But I need direction before I bring the actual budget numbers to the budget committee, because it changes. If you, as a council, want to go in a different direction with these funds, it changes how I set up the budgets. And so I'm trying to get just a general sense of, is this the consensus of the council on how these funds might be spent? That doesn't mean you have to spend them this way. Although, if we are going to open the restrooms, we need to start hiring the custodian here pretty quickly. We don't know, on some of the rest of this, we don't know what those costs and fees will look like coming back. But I think this reflects the goals as have been expressed to me from the council on the direction that we might like to see spending some recovery dollars for the community.
I think it's just, it's amazing that how names can change. I mean, custodial, when I was going to school, that was the janitor. Now it's an OSHA-required COVID response position.
Like it's like a lot
That's
of
really
money.
good, how that became that big. And back in the days, it was Mr. Jones, and he cleaned the floors and cleaned the bathrooms. So I like it, it's good. And of course, when you work for the government, we had those too. We had sanitation engineers. They dumped the trash.
Right.
So, okay, I just wanted to say that.
Well, and I think that one's a no-brainer, because we need to, we really need
There's
to
no
open
doubt.
the bathrooms
And I think
soon.
that there's
Yeah.
some potentials with that for
Yeah.
partnerships. I was going to reach out to Roxy, I was going to reach out to, that's the port manager, I was going to reach out to some other entities where they have everybody has the same requirements.
Exactly.
And if we can, partnership on this, A, it might save the city a little bit of money, but B, it might help open up some of the facilities that we really need to get going and make things just a little bit more accessible. It also makes it easier when we talk about things like the park to talk about restrooms in
Yep.
the park and something that can be maintained. It also deals with the problem that we really struggled with last summer, which was the excess of trash because of containers from to go and the lack of the ability to get the trash picked up from the trash cans timely enough.
Yep.
And I think Dahl's coming next week to talk to us about a good deal of that type of thing.
Cool, maybe we'll get dump tickets.
I am hoping. I have a whole list.
And we've had rare AmeriCorps students before, or interns, or whatever they're called.
That have been really.
Have been
very
really good. Actually, we've had them
helpful. Yeah.
stolen from us. Newport, I remember, have hired them away.
Exactly.
It is really my hope, and this will come to you more in the budget committee, but it is really my hope that we attempt to fund a rare AmeriCorps volunteer every year. There are some communities that do that very successfully, and it's a tremendous amount of effort they get out of them. And they can do really wonderful things, and they do things that just the city doesn't necessarily have the time or resources to dedicate to, but can end up creating tremendous results.
Yep.
And it's very affordable. It's 1,700 hours of effort for $23,000 is And these are usually graduate students working on a project to, get their master's degree, so it ends up being quite nice.
Well, our last student, Rachel Cotton, just wrote an excellent article in the News-Times, yesterday's paper. She was a great help to us and went on to also help Newport, and now I guess she's working privately for a consulting firm, so.
When I mentioned the rare opportunity to DLCD, they were ecstatic because that's exactly who they imagined can do this work.
Yeah.
And, given how busy Holly is, our planner, the ability for a rare student to come in and do kind of the kind of number crunching for her so that she can direct them to get the UGB adjustment, for example, is huge.
Right.
In 1993, I was one of the first AmeriCorps cohorts.
Oh, yeah? Very cool.
And,
Good for you.
because it paid for my college. It's what the deal was. So,
Well, our first one was Mike Serbone, and he also did great work for us, and also went on to, do very well for himself. So, yeah, our experiences have been great so far. So,
it's a good program.
yeah,
And I'm hoping that, because it is competitive to get
Right.
them, I'm hoping that being out on the coast and our commitment, and I'm going to follow up with Rare this next week, I'm hoping that our commitment to try to do this on a regular basis, including space for them here in office space, and will really sell the idea that, okay, this community is willing to make a commitment to the program, and they'll work with us to continue to have volunteers available for us every year.
that'd be great.
Now if we can just find him a house to rent.
That's one. Yeah, you bought one.
And then the last piece of it was the Southworth Park. And that is, we've had some changes actually since I wrote this, in that I met with one of the playground equipment suppliers, and they're going to have their landscape architect do the entire site planning for us.
Wow.
And provide what I thought we were going to spend tens of thousands of dollars doing, they're going to provide for free so that they have the opportunity to bid on the playground equipment.
There you go.
You know that they'll design it for the playground equipment, but the playground is a piece of a much larger park of which they're willing to be designed for all of it. So I think we'll still have some engineering costs, but I think we're getting a lot out of that, and we'll really be able to look at applying some of this directly to matching funds and grants to go out and actually build this thing.
Actually
What
see
I'm-
something on the ground.
Yes.
Finally.
They're nice.
I think this is great. And I think it definitely captured everything that we were talking about in the budget meeting.
And I went to the Oregon Coast Visitors Association, I zoomed the Oregon Coast Visitor Association stakeholder meeting, and we're getting $25,000 for the Southworth statue in the park.
Great.
So that's already been featured, so we're definitely getting that. So.
Great.
Yeah, the hope is, and Jesse should be bringing back to us so that I can bring to you an agreement for some maintenance. The city agrees to kind of maintain, and they have a plan to build that kind of the statue and pavilion area around that. And so that we don't have to spend money on, and then we just maintain it, and I think that'll be a good focal point to kicking off the park.
Cool.
It'll be a learning experience to shift from open space to Southworth Park.
It'll be open space forever.
Oh, and the arts group has already decided August of 2022, there's going to be a folk weekend and arts weekend.
Oh, great.
It's going to be called the Southworth Folk Weekend. We already tied it to the Southworth thing.
Okay.
So we're planning that already.
Good job.
So, yeah.
And the word you used was folk?
Folk. So folk and art.
Okay.
So we have to be careful how we say it. All right. So we don't have to do anything on that, Dan, right? That was just discussion. I think you said.
Yes, that was just, that was making sure that nobody had some radically different ideas, because I have to bring you the budget packet for next week very quickly.
Yes.
And if I want to put that in there, I've got to, it's all in there now. So if there were changes, I'd have to go back.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the wastewater facility plan.
Those of you who have been on the council for a while did the water master plan and the transportation system plan. Those are huge 300-page books that you get dumped on you. I'm trying to avoid that here. We will order those 300-page books at the end so that you can come in and look at them. But what I wanted to do was provide you the executive summary of this. This is our 20-year plan that we go through. It identifies the deficiencies and or issues that we need to address. It is done by engineering, and so it is a fairly comprehensive review of our entire wastewater system and identifies the things that we should do or have to do in some cases, in most cases, the things that we could do, and the things that in the future we should be looking at. In the future, in the wastewater master plan or facilities plan, in the futures are almost always sewer expansions to neighborhoods that now are on septic. That is to our east and to our south. We did try to get them to talk about Alsea Highlands, but there were reasons that they chose not to do that. We may actually contract to have them do an amendment that does include what sewer would look like across the bridge now that we've got a couple more properties there, just in case they ever want to have that piece engineered, and if we can get funds to do that piece of the engineering. But this lays the groundwork. Why these plans are important is that when you go out for grants, when you go out to the USDA, when you go out for infrastructure funds, they want to know that it is in your plan. And so these plans create that backbone of us being able to go out and seek facility monies. So these are incredibly important to us. The process right now is this is going to several state agencies that will now review the plan, and then it will come back to you probably late summer, early fall for adoption. When that happens, what I will do is I will bring you the plan, and then I will put together some kind of summary sheets about the plan so that you don't spend your time reading the 300-page. I have, however, set a link that will go out in the Friday email I sent you all that has the PDF of the manual so that you can start going through and read it at your leisure. It is not exactly barn burning, but I will say that one of the first things that I did as city manager was sat down and read the entire water master plan and the entire transportation system plan as best I could. It's illuminating. It really does give you a lot of the direction of what you need to do as a city. And as we talked about in February, that $22 million list is entirely from the water master plan and the draft of the wastewater master plan. Those two documents inform almost every dollar we will spend on structural infrastructure on those two entities for the next 20 years.
Well, I think also another important reason for the plan is because rather than us trying to figure out what to spend and the timing and how best to do it, you know, we have.
It tells you how.
Above our pay grades for sure,
Yes.
or our skill levels to help us to make those decisions.
Yep.
Well, they're completed, right? Because the TSP, the plan is
The
completed.
TSP has
Yeah.
been completed and adopted. The water
the
master
water.
plan is completed and adopted. And so what we're looking at here is the wastewater facility plan. They don't like calling it a master plan for some reason. But this is the wastewater facility plan, AKA master plan. And it is drafted and going to the state for review, and then we'll come back to you for adoption so that it can be complete and we can print out we did not print out everybody copies because it costs a lot of money to print one of these books.
I have like 3 of them, but it's just because of being in the process and
Right.
getting it like before and then when it was approved and then when it was adopted.
Yep.
But it is interesting, and I'm sure Sue could say the same, to be working on it for so long. And I think the transportation plan, the thing that really stuck with me is it kind of is an evacuation plan at the same time. At least with the meetings that I attended, it was a lot of concern about where we're trying to get people, and especially in an emergency. And so I just thought that it was really valuable. It wasn't just about bike lanes and walking, it was about the sustainability of our roads and what roads we're gonna need in the time of emergency.
Exactly.
So,
And it, the transportation system plan, for example, is a great method for me to look and see, okay, we have X amount of dollars, how do we prioritize those going forward so that we accomplish the critical infrastructure needs? And then how do we look at ODOT, for example, to accomplish some of the, to look for grants to accomplish some of the livability needs that, if we don't accomplish them, it's not the end of the world, but they'd make the city nicer. Whereas some of the ones, if we don't accomplish, the road falls away and we have no way to get up to Crestline Heights. So, there are, these plans do become very important. And as I mentioned earlier, they're how we get funding. That is how we tie into funding resources from the state, being able to point to the plan.
and when we were doing the plan too, I remember we were prioritizing concerns, and I remember the sidewalk was such a far-fetched dream. That, you know what I mean, but everybody wanted it so bad, and so it's like really great to see some of that stuff materialize and kind of get to the top, so.
I had just one question on page 22 of our packet. It's talking about the collection system deficiencies and the recommended improvements. And in the third paragraph, second line, it talks about, in some cases, the area west of Lint Slough, extensive infrastructure improvements are needed. Do they mean west or do they mean east?
I'm pretty sure they mean east.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Again, this is now going for review, but we keep catching these things
Okay,
over time.
yeah.
Although, it might not though, Dan, because I remember them talking when we were talking about the open space, that there was there's old systems underneath the open space.
Yeah, so because it was the high school, we've got a bunch of old infrastructure.
Right.
But we've got pretty good coverage to the west of Lint Slough right now. Really, where we're deficient is the Waldport Heights area and Peterson Park.
Oh, yeah, I hear that, but I was just saying that I remembered them saying that there was stuff like buried in the open
Oh, there's
space,
so
and
much
there
buried.
was,
Yeah.
That's one of
pipes
our
and
biggest
stuff.
challenges with the open space is we have to be careful what we put where, because we don't want to put a $200,000 pavilion on top of a pipe that we're going to have to dig up.
Yeah.
right.
Well, at least that point, it bears pushing back at them to make sure we know what infrastructure they're talking about, but it
Yeah,
seems like
just-
it should be east.
Just in case.
The nice thing is that the details in the plans and that PDF that you'll all be getting
Will
is very
show that.
specific about
Okay.
each different project, breakdowns of costs, distances. It really is quite informative.
Great.
I'm all for a sewer system up in Marlboro, just for the record.
You are until we form a local improvement district and you have to
Yeah.
pay for it.
Yes.
Then I'll
And
move.
she'll be sitting in
Yeah,
those
the-
chairs.
I would like to complain.
Anything else? Okay, shall we move along to the business licenses?
So this one is pretty easy. At the last meeting, remember we talked about business license rates, and we fundamentally kept everything the same with the exception of the short-term rental. On looking at the last resolution and how we've amended it, our city recorder suggested that we just do a new resolution for all the rates so that we had one, because it was last amended in
1992.
92. So we have a nice new resolution for you here. It keeps all of the rates and then assigns the short-term rental rate at essentially the maximum business license rate, which is what was directed last time.
So I have a question on A, is that, for instance, like the Wednesday market vendors?
Actually, Wednesday market vendors aren't required to have business licenses because it's a proclaimed event on public property, on city property.
Okay,
And the same with like beachcomber vendors are a similar sort of time.
right,
But itinerant merchants are simply those that are going to be doing, for instance, a contractor from Portland who's coming down to do one job here is considered a seasonal or transient.
Okay.
They wouldn't need to get a business license for the full year in order to have one job.
okay,
So the city offers that option for $35. It is $35 a quarter. So, you know,
Right.
if they were going to be here for longer than 3 months, that would probably behoove them to just get a regular business license.
right. So like Scotia, for instance, before they bought Vicky's, would that,
No, they got a regular business license.
okay, so that would apply to them?
Because they're not a transient.
Oh, okay, all right, I see.
Transient and mobile vendors are two different things.
Okay,
So, you know, they got a business license which covers their mobile vending unit as well.
okay,
The gentleman that has the crab.
Right.
He gets
Or-
a yearly business license. Chubby's gets a yearly business license.
and then I guess I wondered on F and G, why we maybe shouldn't raise it.
I'm sorry, on G?
F and G, both
Okay.
being gambling related or gaming related.
Well, no, actually, gaming machines does not include the lottery machines. Those
Oh,
are- those
right,
are
that's a
regulated
separate
by the
one,
state.
right.
we
This
have
would be
any-
more like pinball machines and arcade machines.
Yeah, I don't think we have very
I
many.
don't-
Oh, don't we?
I
Okay.
think we've got like 2.
Oh, all right,
And as far as gaming tables, I think there are only 2. I think LC Resort has one and Moose Lodge.
the Moose, okay. All right, so do we need a motion?
Yes. this
What's
is-
the resolution?
It's 1270, sorry.
1270, okay. Do we have a motion for the resolution, number 1270?
I move that we accept Resolution 1270, setting
Alright.
business license fees and replacing Resolution number 1003.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye. Any discussion, I'm sorry, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Planning Commission vacancy. Jerry Phillips has resigned their seat.
So just as we get it filled, another one opens up.
So, do we?
Leaky bucket.
Yeah, there we go. So we have to accept the resignation, declare the seat vacant, and set a time for a new appointment. We suggest the May council meeting. So do we have a motion to accept the resignation?
You can do it all in one.
Okay, declare the seat vacant, and set the review date for the May council meeting on May 13th. Do we have a motion for all of that?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. City
Poor
managers
Jerry.
report.
Jerry's been on there for a while, I feel like.
Yeah,
He's been on the commission.
Yeah, he had, yeah.
It's not the same without Ray.
So, we were so close. The first thing, the Waldport site did not go live today, but we're very close. Really what it came down to is staff, so they had some substantial changes that they still needed to make, and they weren't done until Tuesday. And that hasn't given staff a lot of time to go through and actually put the content in where we want it to. They've got pictures on the front that clearly are from Florida, that they haven't given us an opportunity to change yet. They've got, it's little things like that, and we just felt that if we put the site live up right now,
Yeah.
that it would create some confusion and people wouldn't be able to find things. So we're going through actively right now, making changes, correcting things, fixing it where it says fire department instead of fire district, fixing where it says Waldport instead of Waldport. Things like that. So you can see the site at the link that I sent you. You can see kind of actively where we
At least
are.
it doesn't say Walmart.
And then we hope to have the site go live sometime next week. Really trying to push this quickly as possible to get this new site and start utilizing the tool. The nice thing is we still have our old site, so it's not like we're missing anything. It's just, I'd really like to start utilizing this wonderful new site that we
Yeah,
have.
exactly.
I just don't want it to, people to be like, okay, well, where are the sailboats and
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
$1.5 million home that this family lives in that they've got on their front page, then code enforcement, so you're gonna be getting, oh, shoot. Can you wonder and see if Holly has the copies of the pamphlet available?
Oh, okay.
We've got some pamphlets that I wanted to hand around, and then I'll send you a digital copy for review as well. These are a new tool that we're going to be using for code enforcement that allows us to kind of put on a door hanger. It's got a detailed description of the code. It's got kind of why we're doing this, and then we can put specific notes about individual issues, so that the person getting that pamphlet, it's more of a friendly approach to some of the code enforcement that we've been doing, and allows us to more informally get people interested in fixing up their issues. This is going to be our first step approach to then meeting the second step, which is the more formal letter and citation notice that we provide through Chapter 8 in the Waldport Municipal Code. So this is kind of easing into it, and we hope that this tool will be a better way to kind of not approach things heavy-handedly or kind of confrontationally. It's frustrating because really, in many cases, you have to end up getting confrontational to get results. But I will say that I think that this approach is going to be a good starting point. And Holly's been working really hard on it. I'm excited about it.
She's turning them out right now. She
Oh.
didn't have any.
Okay. We're going through the applicants for the accountant position. We still only have 4 or 5, only a couple from the area. And I'll update everyone on that later. We are offering water to the people outside of the city limits again. We have done that in the past and then kind of curtailed off. We feel that we have a method to do so legally now again. One of the things that is required is a signed annexation form, which allows us to annex that property into the city at any given time in the future. And we do have quite a number of people who have, when informed of this, came in and signed that form right away. So, and that's great news for us because it solves some other problems down the line. I will say we also got another annexation request. We've gotten several just recently, but we have an annexation request from Patterson Park and the property right below it that is owned by Oregon State Parks.
Oh, great.
And so we will have that entire piece now in the city limits.
Does that allow for a trail
That
around?
creates a huge island to the south so that when we are ready to do the sewer project, we can annex in and get sewer to that south Waziata area.
But also, can we get a trail all the way around Lynn Slough? Does it come to the water on
No,
the
no,
east
it doesn't.
side?
Yeah, no, this is all beachfront.
Okay.
This is all beachfront.
Okay.
So, but it does allow that to be in the city. Nothing will change for state parks at all, but it allows it to be in the city. And what that does for us is it does allow us to have an island of those properties to the south, which makes it much easier to bring them into the city and to explore providing sewer services to them. We started this process in 2007? Was this so? We started this process a long time ago, and this is the next big step to getting us closer to there. We have started using Unicode and uploading documents to it. I'll be sending you a link to that, and you'll see, I hope, very quickly why it is valuable. I will say that there are things that we still need to do a lot of OCR translation on a lot of the resolutions and ordinances as they're uploaded. Right now, especially some of the older things, the translations are less than accurate. So we'll do some work on that, but it will eventually allow us to search through all the city documents that are public. They'll be readily available and searchable, and you can do a search for something like dog and find out every place it's mentioned, either in council minutes, in resolutions, and in ordinances. and it will really be a fantastic tool, really will be a great tool, and creates a huge avenue for government transparency here at the city. Because right now, a lot of that is very hard to find and hard to search for.
Have we waived all of Rita's vacation time for the year so she can?
There's more to come.
There's more to come.
It'll be printed on better
Oh.
paper. We just did it on like cheap paper for you guys.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, you know where we rate.
Yeah, it's a series of 5 pamphlets. It's really pretty cool.
They're all trifolds, so just kind of imagine them being folded.
Wow, that's great.
Let's see. Waldport has joined with some other cities for the Mid-Coast Water Conservation Consortium, and I'll provide a lot more detail, and I think I've provided in email some detail on that, but I'll provide a lot more detail as that goes along and we start seeing the outcome of that. It's always weird to join an organization whose goal is to have less water used and therefore less profit to the city, or not profit, less revenue to the city, but it's for the, betterment of everyone, so.
But isn't that one of our requirements?
Yes, it also meets a
conservation
few
plan?
requirements for us, so
Yeah.
that's always a good thing. I am talking right now, we have 3 identified loans, which we're going to be looking at refinancing. Of the loans that are outstanding for the city, those 3 loans are at rates that, we've got a couple loans that are at 1%, which we're not gonna beat, but we have 3 loans that are in the 3 and 4% range, and those are gonna be the loans that we're gonna be targeting to refinance. And once those are refinanced, it will be hopefully to both shorter term and possibly less money. Some of these loans, by the way, go out into the late 40s. And so it really is going to behoove us to tighten up those dates. Some of them aren't even that much money, so we might find ways to pay them off early.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I already talked about the museum move. And then the last piece is short-term rentals and annexation. And then I want to mention the Wednesday market. We are getting some calls from adjacent properties or nearby adjacent properties about what our restrictions on short-term rentals are, and whether there is a benefit to them to annex into the city in order that they can continue operating their short-term rental because of the prohibitions that the county has. I did not want to start advertising that the city is encouraging or discouraging that type of annexation, but it is these will likely be properties that we don't have control of otherwise, and are by rule have to be adjacent to the city. There is potentially some value into suggesting that the city is open to annexation requests so that people could do this. And I wanted to get a feeling from the council before I answered citizens who want to annex in or not based on this purpose.
I guess my only thought is that I wouldn't want us to go down the road of making the mistakes that the county's made by not having some regulations and then end up having to go through this painful process they're going through to try to fix things. And I think the one, we really haven't had much problem with complaints about, noise and numbers of people and that, but I think the one on septic maybe is one that we
I think
should,
that's actually a big one, as we looked into.
that we should pay attention to that issue and not make the same mistake. Other than that, I don't know. Anybody else have a thought?
Well, there's potential for making money.
Yeah.
It does bring in a
Revenue,
significant
tax.
amount of revenue. And
Plus
that
it
is,
Is this
plus the
south?
taxes,
yes.
yeah.
Talk about south.
It could be anywhere.
So
surrounding
it could
us.
be anywhere.
Gotta be
I'm not
conti-
really eager to start accepting a bunch of Bayshore
Yeah.
properties. I mean, I need to be honest.
no.
I've gotten a couple calls from Bayshore, and
Zero.
I'm not jumping up and down to annex more of Bayshore at all.
Can we
Um,
discriminate?
Yeah, that's what my question was. Can we say no to
Well,
certain
so-
We can bring up the septic tanks.
Yes, so, that's where it comes into, okay, can we provide, and this is really the threshold, and I think Councilor Woodruff kind of hits it. Can we provide, or is there a potential in the long term to provide service to that area? And I think that's where we can point to Bayshore and say, no, we have no ability and no plans to provide service. However, to our south, the southwest, kind of along that coastline, yes, we actually can and do plan to provide sewer services along there. And certainly to our east, it is our fervent hope that eventually we are able to provide sewer service out there, and we're already providing water in some cases. I don't know that we would have much demand from the east, but I think we may have from the south a bit. And I think there is a measure of value in, kind of promoting Waldport as a city that is supportive of these small business ventures. I think it's also important to note we don't have a lot of them. And so unlike Yachats or some of the other cities that really are geared around the challenges that they represent, I don't think they represent a lot of challenge right now to the city of Waldport. And where we want to be careful is make sure that it doesn't become a challenge to the city of Waldport.
So if we were to pay attention to the sewer septic issues, would that mean that we would, well, first of all, I guess there's testing that's involved to see what their capacity is. And then might it also mean a restriction of the number of people per bedroom or something that the county's grappling with in order, as it
So I
affects
think,
the
I
septic?
think, especially if we're looking at annexation, we would have to put on some specific guidelines for properties
Okay.
annexed in that had septic, including, some pretty strict rules about when we are doing a septic expansion that they must hook up, or a sewer expansion that they must hook up.
But
So-
in the meantime, if,
I think we would have to follow similar guidelines to the
Okay.
county in terms of looking at the septic systems and,
Okay.
providing some feedback in those regards.
other than
Again, it's
that-
only been 2 or 3, but it's,
Yeah.
I've never seen so many annexation requests coming into the city in the last 6 months. And they're not all vacation rentals. We've got property
Right.
owners who want to develop. We've got people who just want to be part of the city. I don't know if this is a manifestation of COVID or that we're doing something differently, but it seems to be very positive.
That's good. I guess we could do it by case basis, kind of.
Yeah, I just didn't want to start going down the road any farther without talking to you and just getting a sense of whether, you were concerned about short-term rentals in the city, and what the consequences. And it sounds like there's a concrete concern we can follow. But other than that, I would think
Yeah,
that,
other than that, I,
we just look at it case by case.
yeah.
Lastly, we do have, it is close to summer again, and so we're getting some calls about the Wednesday market or the Waldport market. The plan was always to put out an RFP. I was not thinking that there was a lot of interest in starting the market before the June timeframe. However, I got a call from Beachcombers, and they're interested in possibly starting in early May. So
They've already contacted vendors. I've already gotten an email
yeah, that
from
was
them.
a little surprising because we
Yeah.
haven't put out the RFP yet, which is what we said. So my plan was to submit, if it's okay with you, to put out an RFP as of, next Monday, the 12th. It would go for a 2-week review, i.e. people would have 2 weeks to respond, and then I would get the RFPs back, depending on who or how many submitted, and then if there was one submission, approve it. If there were multiple submissions, bring them to you very quickly like we did the other day before the budget committee meeting, and just have you make a selection so that groups could start early.
So the RFP is for the market?
So in the past, we ran the market.
Okay.
And last year, we were not going to run the market anymore. The methods that we did it in the past didn't really make sense, and it wasn't really a profit center for the city necessarily. And so what we looked at was contracting an outside group to come in, and in this case, Beachcombers offered up to come in, and they run the market, and they simply just give us a percentage of the profit, or of the the take. And this allowed us to allow the market on city property, and, you know, we receive some residual income, but we don't have to dedicate staff time, we don't have to dedicate staff resources to managing a market, which was always a little challenging for us.
And then they made money for their organization through the market?
Yes, so Beachcombers presented us with a check about 3 weeks ago for $600, so ostensibly they made $2,400 running the market. I can't speak to their finances or whether that was worth their time or effort. I do know that that was in the heart of COVID, so it was a challenging environment, to say the least.
And closed for most
And
of it,
closed for
right?
most of the summer, so I mean, they were only had, what, 5 or 6 markets?
Yeah, however many.
I think we had like 6.
Eric's the president.
There was a couple of weeks that we had to shut down due to weather.
So he has a good idea.
So what happened with the swap meet idea? Or
Well,
the-
so therein lies the question is, if we put out the RFP, we may get 3 different groups that are entirely compatible because there are 3 different times and 3 different usages. So the RFP is going to be written for, hey, do you want to do a market in the city? And here's what the conditions that the city would impose are, and then we'd find out what groups came back and had interest.
Do we specify that it has to, so you're saying it doesn't have to be Wednesday?
Right.
The group could propose
We
to do it
specify
any
the only
day?
thing they can't do is they can't interfere with the operations at the community center for vaccine distribution, and they can't interfere with the operations of Meals on Wheels, which is in the morning. And generally, you know, there are some challenges there, but right now, Meals on Wheels, I don't see that we're going to be opening the community center building for the Meals on Wheels meals anytime soon. That'll probably happen late summer, if at all, depending on the COVID disbursement. So right now, those would be the restrictions of just, okay, you can't interfere with the other groups, but here's this large space.
Do you need a motion?
No, I just need to make sure there are no significant objections, and I'll get the RFP out and get it going.
No, let's get some stuff going on. And hope that we don't have further restrictions.
Yeah. You know, it is kind of tough getting this and then being like, okay, but we're going into high now, and so we'll be in high for 2 weeks, which is, you know, another challenge again to all of our businesses. The city is not planning on curtailing any of its current operations. The library is going to stay open the way it's been staying open. Sue came to me with a plan last week and said, hey, we'd like to just not change anymore. So we're going to not change anymore. We're still going to have our doors open here, you know, but we're going to be a little bit, you know, more stringent on, you know, when people come in to meet, making sure we're meeting out in this open space as opposed to kind of coming back into the planner's office to sit down and look at a computer, that type of thing. So
I remain hopeful, but it is really scary that schools are opening up next week full blast. So we're going into high and opening up our schools and transit and everything. So I know a lot of offices in Newport are preparing to close, and same with restaurants and bars, because in 2 weeks we might have to.
I can speak on the elementary side. We've been open full-time for a month, and we haven't had a single issue. The kids are happy to be there, and they're willing to follow every single rule we have established.
Yeah,
So
no, I
hopefully it
have
stays
full
fine.
faith in it,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, like, that there's even more kids coming.
Well, not for us. We're maxed out.
I know as a parent, I am now to the point where I'm really looking forward to my daughter getting out of the house.
For their mental well-being, for sure, I'm all for it. but
Getting
it-
out of bed before noon would be just an accomplishment I'd like to see.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've done 4 football games. I will be on the field tonight here in Waldport, and you can tell the difference. Our first game, we had nobody, and then I was in Sweet Home for a JV game on Monday, and they're socially distanced and they're moved and everything. The pleasure of the fans, you could see they're glad to be out. And I understand tonight there are some restrictions for the Waldport game, but there are going to be people to be in the stands to see the games played. And to me, you know, I don't care what, I understand why we went to high. I mean, we get all those records with fire and everything, but we do know the rules. I mean, and we're following the rules. So I'm glad that people are working within the boundaries.
Dan, I noticed I missed exploring trash service requirements for commercial services. Was that something?
And I think we might have missed,
No, I
I didn't
well, and that's
see
because
anything-
we missed the piece of paper in there that would have.
That's why I was
Oh,
going through the
God.
paper and I missed it.
So here's an interesting, we're having some trash problems in the summer. And actually even in the winter, where essentially there's no requirement if you're running a commercial service downtown, an actual storefront business, that you have a commercial sized trash container. And so we've got some businesses that are operating with residential sized containers. And the challenge there is that some of them have significant overflow on a weekly basis. And they just kind of stack things on top and try to make sure it works. Well, when it's windy or stormy, that stuff blows all over the streets, and then we have a trash problem. When I spoke with Dahl about potential solutions to that, they said that they don't really have a method of enforcing commercial customers to use commercial service cans. And they said that would have to come from the city level. And so before I went out and researched exactly how other cities do this, what I wanted to find out was just a general consensus. Is this a restriction that the council is interested in exploring to try to remedy this solution? And the reason I ask is that it does potentially create a burden on some businesses. Some businesses are going to have to pay a little bit more for trash service. Now, I looked at the rates and I actually kind of wish as a resident I could do the commercial trash bins because they're bigger and you don't have to have the same pickup requirements. And yeah, I actually think that wouldn't be a bad thing, but it's not that much prohibitively more expensive either, which is what I thought was pretty surprising. So,
Might it be possible to kind of do a dual thing? I mean, because depending on the business, they may not need more than a small one, but if we had in place something that if they are consistently overstacked, then
and
they
so that's what
must.
I was gonna, the beauty of Municode is that I can now search for commercial trash and get everybody's code in the
There you
entire
go.
state
Yeah.
that deals with commercial trash. And so we can now pick and choose what language might work. And so we might be able to find some really good language of a city that's already solved this problem. I mean, unless Waldport gets ahead of the thing and is starting to write innovative new ordinances, we're actually going to be able to, pick up other people who've already solved this problem. And in some cases, whose lawyers have already vetted this problem so that we don't end up in trouble. I love this idea.
So you do see repeat offenders? There are businesses who other people
Yes.
are complaining about and whatnot?
Yes.
So it's not like they just got like a huge Amazon order and just like
No,
stuff
there are a couple businesses that are just repeat offenders. And when I called Dahl about it, they said, "Yep, we know exactly who you're talking about." I didn't even have to mention where or what. They just, yes. I said, "Okay, so
Because they see
we're
it,
well
yeah.
aware of the problem, and they
Just-
just don't have any teeth to do anything about it."
But doesn't Dahl charge you more, like if your lid is open? And I thought that was like a $5 charge.
So
if
they
your lid's-
can. They absolutely can. It's just a matter of whether that's,
It's how compliant they've gotten.
exactly. And in some cases, the lid's not the problem because the trash is now blown down to
Right,
the
so
side.
it doesn't
Well,
solve
if
that.
you're in this area too, the crows know to go to the overflowing ones and pull the crap out too, so that's what happens all
Can
the
you
time.
tell what kind of business is doing it? Is it like a
Yeah.
food business? or-
Yeah, it's usually a restaurant. There's a couple restaurants, there's a couple,
So that's very relevant to crows and
Yeah.
Yeah,
raccoons.
crows go
and-
there first.
I mean, there are not too many accounting firms that have overflowing trash cans. And if they do, that's a whole different problem.
So yeah, if we had some way of wording it like that, so if people are not causing a problem, they don't have to raise their rate, but if they are, then they need to be responsible.
Maybe they need some of these brochures.
Well, so that's actually why we develop these brochures, so that when we do have these problems, we have a more, less confrontational way of approaching it. And that's really what those brochures are designed for, is to create a non-confrontational approach to, here's why we do code enforcement. Yes, you have a problem, here's why we'll address it. And in terms of garbage in particular, that's one of the reasons that I'm going to be meeting with Dahl, is so that we can look at some of the programs that you asked me for, so that we might be able to help some people with this.
Do you plan to have this on the website, downloadable?
We will have that both downloadable, and we will have printed copies sitting here, and we will actually take those out with us also.
What, I know a couple meetings ago, there was discussion of code enforcement in relation to trash on private property. And there was a mention of having dumpsters.
So I'm hoping.
What's happened there?
I'm hoping that's what this meeting with Dahl. I had a really good conversation with the Chuck in training, if you will. It sounds like Chuck may be retiring soon, but there is somebody who's being kind of trained as his assistant or replacement. And I had a great conversation with this gentleman, and I gave him a list of concerns that we had. And his response was, okay, do you have anything easy for me? So they're coming to meet with us on Thursday, and I hope to go over that list, and I'm hoping that we can make some progress towards some of those that I can then bring back to you and say, okay, hey, here's what they suggested, here's where we might be able to fund or help fund some of these ideas, and go from there.
Yeah, there were two places along Crestline up, fairly close. And one of them has been cleaned up pretty nicely, and the other one is not.
Yeah, we get, so depending on the code and how serious the person takes it and how far we are along with it, we get some pretty good response and we get some poor response. And over time, we escalate, and as we escalate, we start to get better response. In most cases. In some cases, we still just get kind of shined on, but in executive session, I'll actually talk about one case where we're actually turning that around a little bit, so.
Okay. All right, I guess we'll go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 to officer of any public body, a public officer, employee, or staff member unless the person whose performance is being reviewed